Hi, I'm Erica from Nitty Gritty Science, and I'm bringing videos from my interactive notebook series to you. Now, if you are unfamiliar with Nitty Gritty Science interactive notebooks, what I like to do is I like to take science chapters and I break them down into manageable sections. Each section is about a page in notes, and once we have gone and mastered those notes, I like to see how you apply that information right away by doing an activity that's going to go on the left-hand side of your interactive notebook. Now, if you've never used an interactive notebook before, don't worry. You can still follow along on this PowerPoint and have pen and paper and copy down the notes that you need. I've also included the activity that we are going to work on with this section today for free by putting the link in the description below. If, as you go along through the following sections for this chapter, and you'd still like to follow along with those interactive notebook activities, you can find them on nittygrittyscience.com, or you can head over to my store, Nitty Gritty Science, on Teachers Pay Teachers. So again, let's go ahead and get started. When I'm breaking down the Principles of Ecology PowerPoint, this particular chapter has 6 different sections. So you are going to look for 6 different videos in this YouTube series. The sections are very short because, like I said before, I want to make the notes manageable and I want to make sure that you master this information. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with our first section, which is nutrition and energy. Now, this is super important to ecologists when we're looking at the principles of ecology because we need to see how energy flows through ecosystems, and that energy usually comes in a form of nutrition for organisms. So ecology is the study of interactions among these organisms, and not just among living organisms only, but we're going to look at those living organisms and we're going to see how they interact with their environment. Now, a community of organisms that live in a particular area along with their surroundings is an ecosystem. Okay, so when ecologists come and they study how all these living things interact with each other and their environment, this is called ecology. So let's just do a quick review when we're looking at communities and what a community is. Now, the smallest level of organization is going to be a single organism. This single organism, of course, belongs to a population that includes all the other members of its species. So if we're looking at a plot of dirt and we have all the earthworms in there, say, these earthworms belong to a population. Now, the population of earthworms also live in the dirt with all the roly-polies. So these roly-polies are a different species, so that means it's its own population. When I take a population of roly-polies and I take a population of earthworms, put them together, now I have a community, okay, because I have all those different populations. Then the community, along with the abiotic factors such as water, temperature, the air, and importantly, the sunlight, these all form an ecosystem. And in this ecosystem, we want to look where energy is coming from. And the main energy source for most life on Earth is sunlight. Now, organisms that use their sunlight are autotrophs. Now, most organisms, like we said before, use energy from the sun. But when a particular organism uses energy from the sun to make its own food, this is an autotroph. And many times we use a term called a producer. Organisms that make their own food are called producers. Now, if you're reading along with me, some don't always use sunlight, and we're going to get to what those other organisms are called in just a second. But take a look at this picture. What kind of organisms do you think are producers that make your own food? That's right. Grass, plants, flowers, algae. These are producers that use sunlight to make their own food. Now, they're going to use a process called photosynthesis. And photosynthesis is how the autotrophs make food by using energy from the sun. And as we said before, examples of this are plants, algae, cyanobacteria. And a lot of the algae comes from that's out in the water, and the plants come from the land. Okay, so again, this process that autotrophs use to make the energy is called photosynthesis. Now, the organisms that do not use sun but use chemicals to make their own food, they do it through a process called chemosynthesis. They are also autotrophs in the fact they make their own food. But look at this picture right here. This picture are tube worms that live at the bottom of the ocean around hydrothermal vents. Now, if you kind of think about the bottom of the ocean, there is no sunlight down there, absolutely none. The sunlight can hit about through the twilight zone in that depth of the ocean, and any deeper than that, we are completely in the dark. No sunlight passes down there. So organisms down there live a little bit differently. And so the organisms that make their own food down there from chemicals like these tube worms have help from bacteria that are found in their cells, and they take the chemicals from those hydrothermal vents, which are also underwater volcanoes. When they spew off all these nutrients, those bacteria go ahead and convert it into energy for them. So they are also able to make their own food. Not only do tube worms do this at hydrothermal vents, but also around hot springs. There are other autotrophs that make their own food. And in tidal marshes, which are super salty areas, these guys are called extremophiles. But we're getting off on a tangent. But check them out. They're super cool. Okay? Now, autotrophs make their own food, but most organisms do not make out their own food, and they actually rely on other organisms for their energy and their food supply. So these organisms, or heterotrophs, are also called consumers. And consumers are going to be classified by what they eat, okay? So we know that if we look at that chart down below, that we have some organisms or consumers that eat only plants, and we call these herbivores. This heterotroph is called an herbivore. These are deer and cows and horses and caterpillars, right? The organisms that eat only animals and meat, we call those carnivores, like snakes and owls, okay? The humans, like us, we like to eat both plants and animals. So we are consumers that are called omnivores, right? Along with bears and our friendly crows of the sky, they are also omnivores. And then we have detritivores. Detritivores are decomposers, which I'm going to bring you up to that vocab word in just a second, but these eat the remains of plants and animals. Now, detritivores are consumers. That means they have to eat these dead plants and animals to break them down and return them to the ecosystem. These are different from decomposers like fungus and bacteria, which use it's outside of their body that they break down the dead plants and animal remains. Okay, so there's a couple different types of decomposers. The bacteria and fungi go ahead and break them down externally from their body. The detritivores have to actually consume the dead plant and animal remains and return those to the earth. Those include like our earthworms, crabs, mites, that sort of thing. So that is it, guys. That is the end of our first section. Can you believe that we made it? All right. So we want to make sure that you master that information right now. I told you I made them nice and short and chunked them real easily for you. So what we are going to do is take those notes that we just went through on that PowerPoint, and we're going to apply them right away. And we're going to apply them in the activity that I've put in the description for you, where we're going to be looking at skulls. I'm going to turn my page for you for a second so you can see. And we are going to be looking at all the different type of teeth in these skulls. And using what we know from the other page, we are going to determine if these skulls come from, what do you think? Carnivores, herbivores, or omnivores. So I've given you this sheet. If you need some help reading it, go ahead and ask a parent for help. But it's going to give you tips on different type of teeth and what they use to go ahead, and how we use those teeth, I should say, to break down and chew certain types of foods. So as humans, let's think about it real quick. I have in the front my incisors. Then on the side, I had these sharp canines, and in the back, I have flat molars. So for my incisors in the front, those are going to be for grabbing and nipping, right? And tearing a little bit just to bite down into it. But the real tearing and the pointy ones come right here from my canines. So that's going to help me tear into tough meat. It's going to help animals break into hides of other animals. All right. So it's for tearing and ripping, super sharp. And then we have our molars in the back, flat. Those are going to grind our food, not for tearing. That's for chewing and biting and breaking it down into soup or small bits. Those are going to be like our cows and our horses that are chewing grass and plants and that sort of thing. So depending if the skulls are missing maybe our canines, or if they have a mouthful of molars, it's going to probably depend on the type of food they eat. So use what you know from our notes, what we talked about with the different heterotrophs, use the information about the teeth, and please go ahead and fill in that chart. Now, you can either print off the chart using the link I just gave you in the description, or it's on Google Drive. Just go ahead and save yourself a copy, put in text boxes, and fill in that information as you go along. You can add those to your interactive notebook if you're not. Again, please go ahead and look for the next video in the series, Energy Flow and Ecosystems, and join me again when you're ready to move on to your next section of notes in Principles of Ecology. I'll see you then. Take care. Bye-bye.